All right, I'm going to go ahead and just share with you all what we are hoping to do here today. First, we want to welcome everyone and introduce our facilitation team. Then I'm going to go through some context setting, just so we're all aware of what's happening and what's intended here. And then most of our time is going to be spent having a discussion about which components of this ordinance we want amended and how we might propose amending the components. Then we'll have some wrap up and next steps. We do not intend to go until 3 p.m., but what we do intend is for all of you to feel heard. And we intend to take what we're hearing from you and report it back and share with you what we've already learned about what you've shared about these issues thus far. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick and see all of your faces and say hello. I see some smiles, so that's good. My name is Judy. I'm going to be your lead facilitator today. And I am joined by my colleague, Britt. Say hi, Britt. Britt's going to be a stack keeper. That means she's going to keep track of who's been speaking so that we can ensure that we're making space for as many voices as possible within the constraints that we have, which are time and space. I also have Rachel, who's going to be our timekeeper. Very important role. Rachel. We have Jillian from the county here. Thanks for being here, Jillian. I see Heather as well from the town of Fairfax. Thank you, Heather. Thank you all for your partnership and trust in building this workshop. And thank you to all of you who are showing up on a Saturday. We're very happy to have you here, and we're looking forward to this discussion. So before we get started, we want to capture a little more of who's in the room. So I'm going to launch a Zoom poll. If anyone has any challenges with Zoom, please let us know. We do this a lot, so definitely happy to help. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. All right, and if you can see what's in front of you, there are 3 multiple choice questions. Do you live in Fairfax? Are you a landlord of property in Fairfax? Are you a residential tenant of property in Fairfax? So go ahead and pick which one most suits your current circumstance.
I saw it and then it disappeared.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and type into the chat, if you wouldn't mind, the answers to those questions. We know it's not going to be a perfect spread or a perfect way to capture everyone who's here, but we want to make sure that we have an idea of the range of experiences that are here.
I can't click on submit. Is there something, is that, it's just not allowing me to press it. It's not highlighted.
If you scroll down, it'll probably work. Just scroll down.
I did.
Okay.
The submit button is not highlighted. It's faded, meaning you can't click on it.
Okay. Is anyone else having that problem? Because I'm seeing some submissions here.
Yes, I'm having that problem. It does not work.
Okay.
I also am having that problem, not working.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and end the poll. And then what
does that mean the poll is useless if you end it? You know, if some people have submitted their poll result and you don't get mine and the other participants, does that mean this will be discarded as a tool?
No, we're going to use both this and the chat data, and it's not going to be perfect. Okay, we just want to get kind of an idea of who is here. So what you see on your screen is for some of whom already participated. If you weren't able to hit submit, please go ahead and put that information into the chat.
I also dropped the poll questions into the chat for those who might need to reference them. If you scroll up, you'll see the 3 questions, so that way you can reference that. So if you put it in the chat, I'm keeping notes and I will capture that data to add to what we already have.
Okay, and then if there's another circumstance or another experience that you are representing that was not available in the poll, please put that into the chat. We're going to take everything that we see in the chat and we're going to put that into data that will report back so that we can understand who was here, what experiences are represented, right? And when we provide the feedback back to the town and that goes to council, then we'll have an idea of whose voices were part of this workshop.
And will people be able to see the report, or will this be something that?
I'm going to ask that folks raise their hands to speak. Thank you, Morgan. I see your hand there. This is all meant to be shared. These are your words. They're going to be shared back with you. There won't be anything that is hidden, or this is going to be a very open and transparent process. Go ahead, Morgan.
So my partner, Susanna Aguayo, is unable to, she's basically sitting in on my Zoom because her phone won't allow her to log in to be counted, even though she's, we're both Fairfax residents and renters. So I just want to make it noted for the record that she's participating, just she can't independently Zoom in.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for letting us know.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Oh, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
I noticed that if you answer all 3 questions in the poll, then it will take it. You have to answer all 3 questions. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Excellent feedback there. As mentioned, this is just to give us a general idea of who's here. It's not scientific by any means. This is a little bit different than perhaps other engagements you've participated in, where whomever is here and has something to add, that's what we're going to capture. Now, we are creating a digital comment card where we're going to ask similar questions to what we're asking here for folks who were not able to participate, because we know that there are barriers to participation in a variety of ways. So again, we are going to do the best that we can to capture as many different life experiences as possible. In this space, you are all experts, and we want to hear your expertise. You're experts of your lived experience, and that's what we're here to capture. The other way that we are going to organize this is we have 9 topics that we're going to try to whittle down to the 5 most important for us to talk about in this workshop. And the way we're going to try to do that is through another Zoom poll. Yay. Thank you. Appreciate that enthusiasm there, Philip.
That was
so I'm going to go ahead. We're going to try another poll, and we're going to try this together. So will you take a look at what's on your screen now and see if you can pick your top 5. Now I'll read them off. These are all components of the ordinance. Types of units covered, breach of lease, owner move-in, additional eviction protections for elderly, disabled, or terminally ill tenants, buyout agreements, right of return, additional eviction protections for educators, educational staff, students, and families, relocation payments, and temporary relocation payments. And for each of these topics, we have some background to share as well. And we have some experts here on the call as well, some representatives from Legal Aid of Marin and Fair Housing Advocates of Northern California. And of course, all of you are experts in your own domain. So that's what we're here to capture.
Are there any experts here that represent housing providers, or is this only legal aid and Alliance for whatever you said, whoever it is.
That represent housing providers.
Yeah, that's the preferred term. That you're using an antiquated term, landlord, which is offensive to many people, including myself. And I'm wondering if you have any expert here who is here for the purpose of representing housing providers.
Well, I believe that you would be one, Philip.
Okay, but you have a legal aid here. You have legal aid here and another entity here for tenants. I'm wondering if there's one for housing providers.
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being inclusive. I don't really find that an inclusive way to start a workshop.
Okay, well, thank you for being here and representing your stakeholder demographic. We'll go ahead and end this poll, and it looks like folks are still entering.
I have a question.
Sure.
This is Pamela Meggs. I find by only having 5 multiple choice, it kind of puts people in a box. I don't feel that's quite fair. I don't know how you can fix that. Maybe you should have had an additional 1 or 2 for other, where people could write stuff in. This is sort of on your terms. So I would hope you would look at that that there are potential topics that we do not have the ability to pick. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree. The entire ordinance is unconstitutional and is a violation of property rights. So, I don't know. No.
Okay, we're going to ask folks to raise their hands to speak. We are here to host a workshop where we are getting feedback on.
Yeah, I'd like to talk.
And we have constraints of time that we're going to try and keep to. I see that Ashley Robinson has had her hand raised. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag a comment that was in the chat from Kay and I, in that subleasing was not an option, which I think is a high priority topic for a lot of the landlords or housing providers here.
Great. We'll make sure that we address that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't raise my hand, but I cannot figure out how to do it, and there were other people in the chat asking the same question. I know, and I'm embarrassed, but I can't.
Yeah, it's not showing up for me either. I can't find a raised hand. It's normally here.
It's beneath reactions. Do folks have, if you look at your kind of toolbar at the bottom, there should be a little smiley face with a plus that says reactions. Do folks see that?
All it says is recognize hand gestures. Is that it? Reactions.
It should say.
If you punch right on the face, it shows the icons instead of the up arrow. It's poor design.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I see Heather's hand. Go ahead, Heather, and then Philip, you're next.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention to folks who are curious about subleasing, that is under the title breach of lease. So please comment on that.
Thank you, Heather. Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, I think you could have done a rank choice selection here instead of forcing people into a funnel and down the cattle chute into picking their 5 top problems they have with this thing. And I just don't understand why you're forcing us to pick 5 of the of all of the terrible choices within the ordinance.
Thank you for your comment. Rick?
I have to go back to the raised hands. None of those reactions are a raised hand. There's applause, there's thumbs up, there's like high five, all kinds of things, but not I want to speak.
Why don't you go ahead and use one of those? If you have access to high five, we will recognize that as you raising your hand. Will that work for you, Georgia?
Yep. If everybody, that's consistent for everyone.
Yeah, I think some sort of hand gesture, we're going to assume means someone wants to talk.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. Go ahead.
Can I talk now? Can I talk now?
I'm sorry, who?
This is Rick. You called me and some other people interrupted. So I was still on call. Can I talk?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Some of us are on unstable connections. You might notice it on chat. Will this be recorded so that we can fill in the blanks later?
Yes, this is absolutely recorded. We're also going to have a comment card on each of the topics with the same questions that we'll be asking throughout the workshop. Does that answer your question, Rick? Okay.
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Yep. I'm gonna call on the next 4 hands that are raised, and then I'm gonna keep us moving. So go ahead, Kay.
Thank you. I just want to put out there, let's try to let this workshop work instead of being so negative from the start. It's not accomplishing anything. If we have things that we're not happy with, I think we can address that after the workshop. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Kay. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, yeah, I agree with you, Kay. I'm here to actually roll up my sleeves and collaborate. I also just want to say and flag that I think it's problematic that 30% of the respondents on the first poll were not Fairfax residents. So that makes me uncomfortable, to be honest.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, to respond to the last person that just spoke, that's because many of the property owners do not actually live in Fairfax, but they own a property in Fairfax. The majority of the people that live in Fairfax are, of course, tenants. I just want to emphasize somebody else's point about subletting. That has nothing to do with the breach of contract. They're two totally different issues. The subletting is a new right given to tenants under this ordinance, and most certainly needs to be discussed as a high priority item. Let me know when you're ready to jump in for the full discussion. I got my hand raised.
Great. Thank you so much. We're just going to finish up these comments. I'm going to go through all the goals, the background, and then we can move through as many of these topics as we have time to move through. Go ahead, Nicolo.
Yeah, I think that it's good that individual said that he didn't like the term landlord, that he preferred provider, which emphasizes the fact that landlords are actually, or those providers are actually in a business, and all businesses are regulated. And so what we're really talking about is regulating a service to customers. And the other thing that I think that we should keep in mind is not all Fairfax property owners are landlords or housing providers. And as a result, landlords cannot speak for the property owners in general. They're only speaking for those who are in the business of providing a space for rent.
Okay, thank you. We're not looking for general comments at this time. We're trying to prioritize topics so that we can start working together. Does that sound good? So is this a general comment that you have, Michael?
No, sorry, my hand is raised for when you take regular things. Do you want me to raise it at a later time?
Yes, please. Thank you. And we'll describe a little bit about the norms and what we're going to try to do here. I did see one last person. Is this Michelle? Yes. I see you, Michelle.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I want to clarify, I am not a resident of Fairfax at our property, but my husband runs his business over there, and the house and the separate cottage could be rented, but I reside in San Anselmo right now. So I did live in Fairfax for 30 years.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. We're going to go get back into our slides here to share a little bit about the workshop goals. I'm going to keep us moving, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about these topics, and we can address all of them if that's what we want to do here. So the workshop goals are that we share some context and legal background, that we gather input on what, if any, amendments should be made to components of the ordinance. And really, again, we're here to capture your input so that it can be reported back, so that if there are changes that need to be made, I've heard some comments here on many changes that might need to be made. So we're going to capture that today. So a little bit about, if you're not already aware, the ordinances are in response to the needs of the community. These are some of the facts that have been put together. Over 1/3 of Fairfax residents are renters. 34% of renters are severely housing cost burden. Over 50% of income is spent on housing. 68% of renters earn a low income or extremely low. 93% of renters over the age of 62 earn a low income or extremely low. Marin County holds the lowest rental vacancy rates in the Bay Area, and Fairfax holds the lowest in Marin County. The average rent of $2,353 as of March 2023 was resulting in a security deposit of $1,706 if a household has to move. Go ahead, Kay.
Oh, I'm already unmuted, right? I'm sorry if I wasn't. Can you tell me where you got the statistics about 34% of the renters are severely housing burden? Because in our housing report, it's 28.2.
Jillian, might you be able to answer that question?
Yeah, that is census data, and it's possible that the housing report is from HCD. So this is census data.
I just want to address Zoom is capping at 100. It's not. We have up to 500 being able to participate here.
I just tried it and it kicked us out saying it's at 100 and that's the cap.
Okay. We will have to check that in the settings, but we would have to close down the meeting to be able to do that. So we're going to
Several people reported that to me too.
Okay.
I think you should start over. This is Pam Meggs. If you do not have an accurate coverage to allow certain people in who maybe are more people that live in town, I don't think it's right to continue it on. You should have checked this out before you started. Sorry if I sound negative, but it's like you want transparency, then you need to create it. So I don't know what you can do. Other than that, maybe Heather.
Yeah, I would definitely second or third that motion.
Agreed.
Okay, so we're
Agreed.
going to take a 10. Go ahead, Heather. I see your hand.
Respect for all of the comments and all of the people who are here. This is also being projected on Marin TV. So for those who are having trouble accessing, please try Marin TV.
That's unacceptable. That's completely
Right. They can't
cannot
speak.
participate.
Exactly. Exactly.
I
They
prefer
can't
not to be
speak on TV.
muted. Do not mute me, please. This needs to be shut down and started up again.
We're going to take a 10-minute break and then we'll reopen the Zoom and we'll make sure that the cap is not at 100.
Can we hear the rest of the hand raised?
You know what, out of respect for everyone's time, and this really seems very important, I think we're going to follow through with what Judy just proposed. So we are going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to close down the Zoom and we're going to reopen to allow as many folks as want to participate.
Is this
Appreciate that, because it's still a
thank you.
republic, not a communist dictate. So
Thank you
appreciate
so
that.
much, everyone.
Yeah, representative republic. Thank you.
All right. Thank you,
You're not really
everyone.
thanking us. You're just
Oh,
telling
God.
us what.
Name calling, that's really not helpful.
I just
Oh,
have
well,
a
this
question.
is communism. This is an attack.
No, it
This is not helpful. This whole
I think
discussion
we
is
should
not
ardent
vote.
helpful.
communism that you guys
Discussion is not helpful.
I don't have the capacity to do that, but I think we should move forward with that.
I just have
Yeah.
a question. Usually you can't get the same meeting ID. I never got the announcement of the Zoom meeting in email today. But it was posted on the town website. So how are we going to get the updated meeting ID if that's not possible?
It'll be the same meeting. We're just going to make sure that the cap is not at 100.
Okay.
It'll be the same ID. Okay, so we will see everyone back here at 10:40.
Hopefully.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. We now are able to host 500, so hopefully that'll be enough. Just wait for folks to filter back in. But as we do that, we want to remind folks that we have some agreements to make here together. We ask that you be kind and respectful. Please no name calling. Folks, just want to remind you that we have some community agreements here. We ask that you be kind and respectful. Please no name calling. If we can't adhere to these agreements, we will actually mute you or ask you to leave. It's not meant to be anything but generative here. Thank you for the thumbs up. I see that. If you have been speaking a lot about a particular topic, we ask that you be aware of that and make sure that there's space for others. We want to be curious in this space as much as possible. We do want to keep things on time. We know that you all are sharing your Saturday here. We ask that you raise your hand to speak and use the raise hand feature. We have shown where the raise hand feature is within Zoom. Hopefully folks have access to that. If not, we'll be monitoring the chat. Myself, Britt, and Rachel are your facilitation team. If you have direct comments, try to send them to Britt or Rachel because I will be holding this space communicating with everybody and I won't be able to see all of your comments. We are also going to ask if you have verbal comments to please keep them within the context of what we're sharing. So right now we're sharing about our community agreements. We're going to have to remove one of those participants there. We ask that you please not share anything that is not relevant to this topic. And then finally, we will be taking stack. Britt will be keeping track of who's been speaking, and we'll make sure that we have the opportunity to ensure as many people can speak as possible. So with that, I'm going to go back to the context slides and then we're going to get into the discussion. Michael, anything relevant to the community agreements or taking stack here that you would like to share? Okay, so
Michael, you're currently on mute if you're speaking. And just as we're getting going, if you have something that you want to add, just raise your hand, or you can even come off mute and tell me you want to be put in the stack. And I am keeping a list. So right now I have Michael and Susan in there, and then followed by Philip, who I just saw raise their hand. All right. And that's the order that we will be going in when it's time to speak. Thank you. Michael, you're still on mute, by the way.
So the meeting has definitely been compromised here in terms of this being a link that was put out widely, and there are some folks who are attending that are doing some nefarious actions here. So we're just going to try to keep moving as quick as we can, or as meaningfully as we can to move forward. Britt, where are we at with stack? Oh, you're on mute.
Currently, I have Michael and then Susan and then Philip.
Okay. I'm going to go through these context slides real quick. So a little bit about the process here. Between March and November, the town hosted 8 town council meetings and workshops to hear input from the community while developing these just cause and rent stabilization policies. Many Fairfax residents voiced their opinions at these meetings. 201 comments, over 156, 78% voiced support. There were no paid consultants as part of the ordinance creation or outreach process. This particular workshop is funded by a grant from the Association of Bay Area Governments. Team, I'm not really sure what to do about the what's happening there on the slides. So let's go ahead and share a little bit more about this process. So here's a look at the timeline for those of you who may not have been involved. Okay. Team, thoughts on how to handle this bombing that's happening here? Just gonna keep trying. So where we're at now is this workshop is intended to, again, get input on components of the ordinance that folks are requesting to amend. This, okay, so we open it to more participants, and unfortunately this also happens, so.
Yeah, I'm doing my best to remove there's a username associated, and so I continue to remove that person. So sorry, I am working on trying to control what's going on.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for your patience.
Okay, so a little bit more about the state law known as the California Tenant Protection Act. This law has been in effect since January of 2020. It requires a landlord or property owner to establish just cause to be able to terminate a tenancy. AB 1482 is superseded by more protective local just cause regulations, and it does not remove or replace existing local tenant protections unless they are less protective than AB 1482. On balance, Fairfax's ordinance are considered more protective. So as a reminder, just cause has been in existence as a state law since 2020. This ordinance supersedes state law, but is not very different. However, there are protections that address local needs. And then here are some similarities. Property owners will still be able to evict for at-fault reasons in state law, including failure to pay rent, nuisance, and criminal activity. Landlords can also evict for no-fault reasons and in some cases exceed state law. For example, termination of a temporary tenancy in order for the owner to move back in with no relocation payment. Most exemptions in state law are the same in the local ordinance. So those are the ways in which they're similar. And then this slide is about differences. Relocation assistance exceeds state law. In most cases, for example, additional payments for a tenant who is 62 years of age, etc. Short-term relocation exceeds state law, including short-term location payments for renovation work, and additional protections, including school year protections for educators and students, right of return, liability for re-renting units after withdrawing from the market, and first rent refusal. So with that, we're going to get into the facilitated discussion. I'm going to stop this sharing real quick. Britt, I'm going to ask that you help me here with the discussion. So we prioritize some topics. The discussion format are that we provide a brief overview of the component of the ordinance. We ask you all, is this a good idea? Why or why not? What are some of the unintended consequences of this idea, and what changes would you make? So the topics that we saw come to the top were, again, I want to remind folks about Zoom norms that will be taking stack. So these are the topics that went out in a survey to all of you. Some folks were able to fill out a survey here. We have the types of units covered, breach of lease, owner move-in, additional eviction protections, buyout agreements, right of return, additional eviction protections for educators, relocation payments, and temporary relocation payments. And so as part of what we launched here in the beginning, we were asking if we could prioritize 5, and that looks like types of units covered, relocation payments, right of return, owner move-in, and buyout agreements. Now we are going to provide a comment card for the other topics as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start us with types of units covered. And here we have some information about the types of units covered. And we want to just be able to have a discussion about this. Are these good ideas? Yes or no? Why or why not? What are some of the unintended consequences of having this types of units covered as part of the ordinance, and what changes would you make? So with that, I will go ahead and remind us that we're talking about types of units covered. We have about 20 minutes total to discuss this issue, and we ask that your comments be around this particular piece of the ordinance.
And just to refer to the stack, I'm going to drop the current order into the chat. The first person I have is Michael Burke, and then Susan, and then Philip. And again, I'll drop the rest of the order inside of the chat right now and add folks as I see them.
Thank you, Britt. Okay, so we'll start then with, did you say Michael Burke?
Yep.
And I'm just going to pipe in and say I'll be keeping time. We're going to try and have comments stay to a minute so that we can hear from folks. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rachel.
Am I on? All right, first, I have to back up just a second before the initial topic because you skipped something when the meeting crashed. You showed some rental statistics, the average rent and average rent and an average security deposit. I'd be curious, you didn't say if that's for Marin County as a whole or Fairfax only, and I'd be very curious as to where you got those statistics because they do not at all agree with my own statistics. Next, you jumped into the outreach program that was done on this before the ordinances were enacted, and I would take great exception to that. This was pushed through by the DSA, and the only outreach was to tenant groups through the actions of DSA. I found out about this in November from an article in the IJ. I immediately sent out a mailing to all Fairfax apartment building owners, and I'm sorry, to a person. Nobody knew anything about this. There was no outreach, and town council acknowledges this. One of the members tried to do an outreach. It was overturned.
So that's time, Michael. Thank you so much for your comment. And I just want to remind folks, just for the sake of moving through the topics, which is actually the purpose of this meeting, we're going to ask that you keep your comments on topic. So in this case, we're talking about types of unit covered. And if you have other comments, the chat is open, and that's really where we'd like you to put those comments. Thank you so much, Michael.
Wait a minute, before you cut me off. You raised 2 things for comment. We raised hands, and then the meeting crashed. You never went back to address those. I'm happy to address the current topic, but the other things had to be addressed first. Is that okay?
Yeah, and we heard your comment and we gave you a minute. I appreciate hearing from you, Michael. Thanks so much. We've recorded your comment.
This meeting is ridiculous. I'm out of here.
Jillian, would you like to share anything about where the information on the background slides came from? And then we'll go back to moving into the topics.
Yes, the information in the background slides is from a combination of the census and the housing needs data that we received from the state.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to keep moving on this topic of units covered.
Susan is next.
Susan, are you with us?
If Susan is not here, then Philip would be next.
Go ahead, Philip.
And Philip, you're currently on mute, so.
Yeah, and there we go. Okay, I could not unmute until you just allowed it this second. So I'm going to ask for a few more seconds here to pick up on what Michael Burke just said about process. There was no outreach. I know this is not what you wish to discuss. This is what I wish to discuss. And I'm a taxpayer in Fairfax, and I believe I have the right to discuss this. I've spoken to 4 of the current members and former member Goddard. All of them admitted that outreach was extremely poor, and that's just going into this thing that way. I found out a day before this happened. The vote was that this was going on, and that's where I came in on that. As far as what you want me to speak to at the moment, you no longer have that slide up, so it's difficult for me to do that. You don't need to read everything. It'd be nice to see the slide right now to find out what we're actually discussing. Where are we in the conversation right now?
We're talking about types of rental units covered.
Yeah. So all types of rental units should not be covered by these ordinances. There's nothing within the just cause ordinances that I feel is reasonable. Going back to the survey, which was also brought up earlier, the survey was missing the most important question. Should these ordinances be completely 100% rescinded and a rebuild?
Philip, that's time. That's
I
a minute.
know.
Thank you so much. There's
1
many
minute.
people that want to.
I thought we got 3 minutes. Well, where did we get 3 minutes?
It's 1 minute. Everyone
Well, where
has
did
1
you come
minute.
up with 3 minutes? I heard 3 minutes.
I'm sorry. We're keeping it to a minute. We have many folks at this point that are trying to that we're trying to hear from. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next is Ashley Robinson. And I see Ashley's here, probably just searching for the unmute button.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Oh, there we go. Sorry if it wasn't allowing me to unmute for a second. A comment quickly on context. The one thing that I feel has been missing is a description of the type of housing that's here in Fairfax for our local renters. How many renters are in large apartment complexes? How many are in single family homes? How many are in attached JDUs? How many are in actually room boarders? I think this ties into the next topic, which is these ordinances are not completely written, I think, for the type of housing that's offered here. These ordinances are way too invasive for folks like myself who have tenants in attached JDUs, which cuts across many of the topics, including subleasing, owner move-in, relocation for if the home becomes inhabitable. There's just many of these topics are way too burdensome for people who are owner occupied.
And that's a minute. Thank you so much, Ashley, for your comment.
Ashley.
Up next is Mark Bell. If he's still here, if Mark is not still here, then it's Claire. And go ahead, Claire.
I would like to address the last item, short-term rentals. It seems disingenuous to allow short-term rentals in a community that has such limited property for rent. And I think if somebody is serious about rent control and rent stabilization, they actually need to eliminate or strictly limit the number of short-term rentals, because this actually takes properties that could be rented to tenants who need long-term housing off the market, and also contributes to rising rents due to supply and demand issues.
Thank you, Claire. After Claire is Michael Sexton.
Great, thank you for that. I did think that there were a couple of points that Michael Burke raised in terms of outreach. There was no outreach to housing providers, and trying to follow up on some of the other points I made down there. You were talking about no coordination with paid consultants, but there was a lot of coordination between Kurt from the DSA, Leah Weisberg from the Berkeley Rent Control Board, and Chance and Stephanie. So there's a lot of coordination there. In fact, fact, the ordinances that were adopted were basically 90% identical to the ACCE model ordinance that was written by Leah on there and adopted. In fact, this calls it the Fairfax model ordinance written by that organization. So to say that there wasn't paid consultants might be true in the origination of this, but it doesn't tell the full story. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that comment, Michael. Noted. We do ask that the folks who have your hands raised keep it to the topic that we have at hand right now. Go ahead, Britt, with who's next.
Clifford Swan. I hope I'm saying that. And then if Clifford is not here, oh, 1 second. Whoops. After Clifford, it would have been Georgia. And if Georgia is not here, then we're going to go with Wynn Richards.
Hi. In 40 years of living as a renter in Marin, I've only been able to afford duplexes. I think it would be ridiculous to exempt duplexes because they're homes just like everything else. And I lived in a duplex in Fairfax for 15 years, and I was asked to leave, told to leave because the landlord wanted to fix it up and, update it and rent it for a lot more money. And that was really, really hard on me and my family. I was a teacher, and it was in the middle of the school year, and we had to uproot and find a place within 60 days, which was really difficult. Duplexes are no different than anything else, so I don't want to see them exempted. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Wynn.
After Wynn, it would be Morgan.
And we do have a suggestion here. If Morgan, you wouldn't mind identifying yourself as a property owner, renter in Fairfax.
Yeah, I'm a renter in a duplex with my partner Susanna Aguayo and I, and she is not able to zoom in, and she's on the Zoom as well.
Okay.
And we both feel that all of the different units in the proposal should be covered under rent control. Especially, I think duplexes should fall into that category. And I appreciate everybody's comments from all sides of the issue.
Thank you so much, Morgan.
Thank you, Morgan. Is Pfeffer still on? If so, you will be next. If not, then it would be Luke. And then if Luke is not here, next would be Kay.
Hi, this is Kay. I am a native to Fairfax, a 30-year renter in Marin, and now owner of a home with a JDU. I would like for owner-occupied to be out of just cause. It is an intimate relationship. It is not like renting an apartment or a home, and it also does not allow owner move-in. And the subleasing is really what's really terrifying to me, because most of our ADU, JDU, owner occupied are seniors, and this does not allow them to vet the replacement subleasee or the family member that could move in. And it really puts people up for elder abuse. And I'm sorry, but off topic, just for future, starting out the way you guys start out, it really crushes all of us, and it makes it feel like it's so biased. That's just a suggestion for going forward. I just feel defeated already.
Sorry to hear that, Kate. Was that with the information that was given at the beginning? The slides with the statistics? No.
So there were a couple people who are here but are having troubles with unmuting. So I want to go back to PJ Pfeffer, who I think is still here, but he may need to be asked to unmute. So if any of the other hosts see PJ, could you please unmute them so that they can speak?
Hey, thank you.
PJ Pfeffer, a homeowner in Fairfax. My comment on the types of units covered, actually, I think Kay just did a good job. I think it's helpful when suggesting a type of unit that shouldn't be covered. People explain what specific circumstances under which they want to be able to evict someone, that they can't evict someone under this ordinance, and why that's particularly of concern for such a type of unit. Like, for example, what Kay said with subletting for owner-occupied units. I understand some people have spoken so far, but I think that's will help direct the conversation and make it more productive.
Thank you, PJ. And then another person who also was having trouble with muting was Luke. And then I just want to note that we're going to let 4 more people talk, and then we're going to move on to the next subject. We do have a digital comment card. So if you have more comments to give on this particular subject, we'll share that comment card at the end and you can add those. But just for the sake of time, we're going to have 4 more people talk, which will be Luke, Naomi, Graham, Irwin, and Rick. And then after that, we'll move on to the next subject. Does that sound okay, Judy?
Yep, that sounds good to me. Thank you, Britt.
So is Luke still here? If he is, can someone unmute him?
Yes, I was allowed to unmute this time. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Lovely. Sorry to be joining on my phone. I seem to have been purged during that bombing that was happening earlier from my work account. Not sure if we can get back in on the computer. So I work with a home sharing program called Home Match. We work with mostly older adults who are looking to rent a room in their home or apartment and help them to connect with community members. And I think there are merits to both sides of this argument. But what I would say is that if there's not an exemption for single family owner occupied homes, it's definitely going to constrain the number of affordable rooms that are available in a county where the average cost of a studio is over $2,000 and bedrooms are often the best option. Many of the older adults that we work with are very low income, suffering from social isolation, and one of their only paths to being able to remain in their home is renting a room in their home. And not having an exemption for those older adults that are living at home alone in their home that are looking to rent a room can be constraining on them feeling empowered to be able to rent that room. I understand the other side of the argument too. I'm not sure what the best solution is, but I just wanted to share that information.
Thank you very much for that, Luke.
Next would be Naomi.
Go ahead, Naomi.
Hi there. Hi there. Thanks so much for putting this on today. I appreciate everybody's patience with it all. And I just wanted to mention that I think it's really important that as many tenants as possible are covered through this ordinance. That said, I think that an exemption should be made for a room in a single family owner occupied home without a bathroom or kitchen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And then Graham.
Hello, thank you. I want to first thank you for you and all the facilitators for your efforts to do this and apologize because it is a very charged topic and many of us on this have felt excluded until now. And I take exception with your opinion at the beginning that this ordinance is similar, quite similar to the state law. And I would point out that if you examine the state law, you can see what I would call common sense exceptions for this. And I would pile on and say, I think it's problematic in general, but it's particularly problematic when it's in one's own home, because it really, by definition, the purpose of this law is to limit the control that one has over one's own home. That's, I mean, in the context of helping a renter, certainly, but if this law has no impact on one's own ability to control the sanctity of one's own home, it has no purpose. So I think that's a particularly charged issue. I think it continues, it's much broader than that, but that is a sacred space. And this is intruding in significant ways that we don't have time to discuss today. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Graham. I appreciate those comments.
And then the last comment on for this particular topic will be Rick. And again, there is a digital comment card for folks who maybe don't get to talk on this topic. So those folks who want to say something on this but will not be called on right now can feel free to put those comments in that digital comment card. So Rick will be our last speaker on this particular subject.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Britt. I really do. I agree with Graham and everyone before that. We really appreciate your work here. And I also agree with many of the speakers that the intimacy of a room or a JDU without a separate entrance in a single family owner occupied home is intimate sacred space, to use that term, and that then an exemption, they should be exempt. I think that if anything requires an exemption or someone thinks that it should, they should make a list of their reasons, send them to Heather Graham specifically about, or Heather, our town manager, sorry, and let them know their reasons why the exemption shouldn't apply. But I do think that the sharing a home is definitely exempt, and we were led to believe that during our housing element workshop last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Judy, I'll turn it back over to you to move us into our next subject. And for those folks who have their hands on, I'm still including you in the stack for the next topic. So if you want to comment on what we talk next, keep your hand raised, and you'll definitely be put in the queue for that topic.
And we are sharing the card shortly. I'm just making sure that all of the settings are set so that everyone is able to respond to each topic. We're going to go ahead and move into the owner move-in topic here, which a little bit of background as well. Under the law, a tenant may be evicted if their landlord or their landlord's spouse, child, parent, or grandparent seeks in good faith to occupy the unit as their primary residence. This is referred to as an owner move-in. Your landlord cannot pursue an eviction for an owner move-in if any of the following are true. Your landlord or a landlord's family member already occupies a unit on the property. There is another vacant unit on the property. There is another comparable unit on the property occupied by a tenant who moved onto the property more recently. If you have resided on the property for more than 3 years and are 62 years or older, disabled, or terminally ill, unless your landlord's intended occupant is also disabled and there is no other vacant unit on the property. And we can also drop into the chat the FAQs where this information came from for the owner move-in. And of course, here our questions are going to be, is this a good idea? Why or why not? What are the unintended consequences of this idea and what changes would you make? Roughly, we're going to spend a few minutes for each of these. Go ahead, Britt, on stack.
Yes.
And we see some good comments here too.
So first we have Nicolo. And then just, yeah. You should be able to unmute now, Nicolo. There we go.
I think that what we've seen in many large cities with owner move-ins is that it's a subterfuge for eviction. And I think that one of the confusions here is that when people rent rooms in their houses, it's still a business. And basically that's how rooming houses began. And people who are renting rooms in their houses oftentimes are simply running a business. And most of them that I've talked to oftentimes don't even have a rental agreement. And so people should think about the fact that renting a room is a business and that they should have a rental agreement to protect them. And the rental agreement also can, under state law, can limit the ability of the individual they're renting to in terms of subletting or having visitors, et cetera. And that's the missing part here, is that the responsibility of the person who's renting the space is completely absent from this argument. And, rooms in houses are also a vast increase in people's income through vacation rentals, which are really causing what's called neighborhood deserts in our cities all across the country, where more and more people are doing
Nicola,
this.
that's been a minute. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your comments.
Up next is, oh, I'm sorry, was someone else trying to?
Oh yeah, that was me, Britt. Just a reminder from folks in the chat to state where you live and if you own property in Fairfax.
And then up next is Brian and Sharon. I hope I'm saying that right too. Yeah.
Hi, this is Sharon. We and Brian and I are here. We're both Fairfax residents and homeowners. I have a little bit of trouble how this is working because we have more interest in talking about certain topics. But what I wanted to say, I think, about this whole process from our perspective is there were many things that were written into these ordinances that we have no clue if they were big issues in Fairfax or not. We don't have feedback, even from having watched town council meetings, how widespread some of these issues were. And by having a meeting in this way, we have no opportunity to talk about what was the issue, what are other possible solutions to it that were not written into the ordinance the way they were. And so all we get to do at this meeting is say we want something in it or we want something not in it. There's no opportunity where we could have in person to be talking about what would be a better solution. How many people did this really affect? So in terms of talking about what types of things should be subject to it, right now, by having single family
That
homes.
was a minute. That was a minute. Sorry. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the next speaker.
Up next, we have Luke.
I'm sorry about that. I think I hadn't lowered my hand. My apologies.
No worries at all. Up next, we have Mark.
Yeah, hi. I tried to speak on the other one. Okay, there's like a couple of things that were really unclear. Like in the beginning of the meeting, there was some reference to something nefarious going on your poll where you talked about how many Fairfax residents were involved. A lot of those were non-Fairfax residents. I am a Fairfax resident and have been for most of the time since 1974. There was no landlord participation sought, and that's why people have an issue with all of this, because landlords are not sought out. Instead, lunatics like the Berkeley Rent Board, the Democratic Socialists of America, they're de facto consultants, and they look to benefit from this. And so there's money involved there. And, temporary relocation is the issue that I would really like to see addressed, because that's absurd, because the tenant.
That's been a minute. That's been a minute.
I just want to finish up if I can.
Okay, you can finish the sentence. Yeah, we just have to move on.
The thing is that the tenant, forced to move out for a month, makes an additional $6,000 cash in their pocket. How does that make any sense? Okay.
Thank you so much, Mark.
And we are going to ask that we not use name calling in this space. If that happens again, we will have to remove folks. Britt, who's next?
Yes, we have Joe's iPhone next. And just so folks are understanding stack a little bit, I am putting people on a line, but if I've noticed that someone who hasn't spoken before joins, I will try to, just and for the sake of equity, I will try to make sure that that person gets to speak. So Joe's iPhone, who I think we haven't heard from at all during this meeting, is going to be next.
Thank you, Britt.
Yeah. And if that person is not here, because I'm not seeing them anymore, just want to check and make sure. And that there's no in the chat. Okay, if Joe's iPhone is not here, then we're going to go with Marguerite Honey. Oh, and you're muted. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, you know what? You muted me and I have been trying to unmute myself and it would not. I've been sending you texts. Anyway, I think this whole thing is absurd. and people should have the right to choose who they want and evict who they want. There are already caps. But what I'm saying, the previous person said that it's a rentals are business, and businesses should be regulated. Well, so is Safeway, all the grocery stores, all of those places are businesses. Should we go and put a cap on their price, what they charge for lettuce, bread, meat, milk? It is similar to this one, if you're taking it as a business. So this is a problem that the government should take care of, not the landlords, especially not the mom and pop landlords, and especially there should be no regulation on who we can take and who we cannot evict out of our home when they rent a room. Or
that's time, Marguerite.
So on. It's just 1 minute. I'm timed 1 minute. I thought 2 minutes.
No, there's 1 minute. There's 1 minute.
The whole
Thank you
thing
so
should
much.
be rescinded. There is no room for compromise.
Thank you for your comment, Marguerite. Thank you.
And then next we have Morgan Fang.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with the ordinance as it's written in terms of, what are the situations where someone can or can't be evicted from a unit, and the priorities given to who's been there longer and those particular aspects of the ordinance. Thank you.
So we have two more people that we can allow to comment on this particular subject. That will be Kay and Ashley, and then after that, we're going to need to move on to the next topic. Everyone who is currently in queue for the stack, I will keep you in queue for this stack, and you'll be the first ones to be called on during the next topic. So Kay will go first, and then we'll close this out with Ashley as our last comment on this particular subject.
I would like to advocate for owner occupied to be exempt from the just cause part because of this, because they cannot utilize owner occupied because they were already living on the premises, and they are the poorest of the land providers, and there are mostly senior citizens who will have to move in, most probably a family member to help care for them, whether it be long-term or short-term. Also, it is very biased because for renters, significant others and aunts and uncles are considered family members, but they are not for homeowners, or I'm sorry, people who rent. And also, real quick, there's only been 4 applications for ADUs. And we need 20 a year to be built. The more strict you do for our ADUs and JDUs, it will end up being more units that will have to be built under the housing element.
And that's the minute. Thank you so much.
We'll go with Ashley next, and then I see Joe's iPhone has just popped back. So actually, I'm going to let Joe be the last comment since you were in the queue before and you disappeared. Now I see you. So Ashley will go next, and then we'll end with Joe.
Okay. Very similar comment to Kay, but from the inverse side, that owner occupied should not be considered for this. I am a younger property owner who rents an attached ADU, and part of the point of this was to have the flexibility to move in elderly relatives in the future for caretaking purposes. And now that option is off the table. And had I known this, I would not have sunk incredible expense into purchasing this place, and also the incredible expense of fixing it up so that it could be habitable for myself and tenants. That's it.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley. And last comment will come from Joe's iPhone. And then go ahead and unmute if you can.
Hopefully,
Here we go.
I'm unmuted. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. These ordinances, as they're currently written, I'm sorry to see them because they will result in less rental housing in Fairfax, landlords will rightly see that they cannot manage to control their lives and their finances, and they'll lose more and more money each year because they cannot keep up with inflation. They're not stupid. They're going to realize that they're going to lose their money, so they're going to put it elsewhere and just sell the place for a single family. Unfortunately, we're going to have less and less people investing in rental properties. Net result, people who, like my son and other people who are younger and don't have money, will not be able to find rentals in Fairfax because of these laws. That's what I have to say.
Thank you.
All right, and I will give it back to Judy to take us on to our next topic.
And I realize that there has been some confusion about the ways that the questions have been laid out in these in our slides here. So we are asking for folks to speak for 1 minute to potentially each of these questions. So on our next, but given how many folks we have on the phone, we're trying to keep the verbal comments to a minute. Everything in the chat will be recorded and shared back as well. On the buyout agreements, nothing in this chapter shall expand or limit a landlord or tenant's ability to negotiate or agree to end a tenancy voluntarily in exchange for money or other considerations. All buyout agreements under this section must be in writing, provided in English and translated into any other language at the tenant's request. This does not mean a buyout agreement is required, but it is possible if both parties agree. So the questions here, is this a good idea? Why or why not? What are the unintended consequences of this idea and what changes would you make? And I will go ahead and put us on gallery view so that we can see each other. And go ahead, Britt.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say first in the stack, we have Philip, but go ahead and finish your comment, Judes.
Oh, just that we're going to try to keep to 1 minute per comment, and please make sure that we're staying on topic on buyout agreements, and reminder that we will also be recording everything from the chat. Go ahead, Philip.
Okay, am I unmuted?
You're good.
Great. Okay, so this is just everything in the ordinance, point by point, is completely ass backwards and ridiculous, including this particular point that we're discussing right here.
Real quick,
Okay.
I just want to just a reminder about language, if we could refrain
Okay,
from.
an ass is actually a donkey, and it's backwards.
I hear that, but
so don't take my time for this. But don't take my time for this, and don't shut me up, please.
Hey,
are you
we're
taking my
not
time for this?
We are not talking your time. I'm making
Good.
an interruption as a facilitator just to remind everyone that of language. And though you may consider that a animal, a lot of people consider that a cuss word. So can we please monitor language? Go ahead and
well,
continue.
I will do my best. I'm not going to get hung up on language. Everything in these ordinances is ridiculous. Glad to hear your as.
Go ahead and continue.
What kind of warning is that? I can't use the word. My time's
time
back.
is starting
Thank
back.
you.
We
Thanks
have
so
30
much.
more
I
seconds on the
appreciate
clock
you.
for you.
Thank
30 more
you
seconds
so
on the
much.
clock.
So this whole process is ridiculous. You thanking me and the facilitator thanking me is a joke. You don't care about me. What you're doing is you're putting me in a cattle chute and everybody else in a cattle chute. You're going to count us up and you're going to report back to the council. So many people thought this, so many people thought that, and it's just a ridiculous process. And just so you know, you'll have one less participant starting now. Thank you for nothing. Nothing.
And up next, we have Rick Hammer.
Thanks, Brett.
No,
a host is not allowed to. Okay. Hello?
Hi,
Oh, I tried to unmute myself. Okay. Thanks again, Britt and Judy. I'm trying to track here that I believe that we're on owner move-in, but I kind of lost track. If we are, I just wanted to differentiate the purpose. If it's for sale of property, that is a profit-making move, which is different than moving in a family. So if the owner move-in has any type of linkage to an owner family member moving in, like, for example, the heir of a property for the purposes of shortly later cleaning things up and then reselling the property, that's a profit-making move, and the tenant should be compensated for that. But if it's doesn't have a profit-making purpose, owner moving should be something that is an acceptable exemption. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rick. Britt, who's next?
Next we have Marguerite Honey. Marguerite Honey, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we.
Okay. Owner move in, if an elderly landlord wants to move in and the current tenant happens to be a disabled or senior, that means they can never evict them. That means the elderly landlord cannot move into their own property at all. If the tenant, let's say a senior tenant who is there is 70 years old and the landlord is 75 years old, the tenant will live, let's say, another 20 years up to 90. And then when is the landlord allowed to move in? After they die? If you add 75 or 70 plus 20, that is ridiculous. The only concession is that if the elderly person is living there, they should be given 6 months notice, ample time to find other accommodations. It's against tenants' rights, all of this. I mean, owners' rights, sorry, landlords.
Marguerite, last minute.
Rights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, I had Georgia Gibbs in the stack, but I'm not seeing Georgia anymore. If Georgia's still here, go ahead and re-raise your hand so I might be able to unmute you. Otherwise, we'll move on to Sarah Gold. Let's go ahead and go to Sarah Gold, and Georgia wants to speak. I'll make a note of it. Sarah, go for it.
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, hey. I just wanted to respond, I've had my hand up for a while, to the opening statistics, because I think it did demonstrate that there are a lot of tenants who are cost burdened, but I also think that there are a lot of property owners that are cost burdened because we live in a housing shortage. And I think it's overly black and white to think that only one group, and there's census data. If you can look up census data about homeowners, and it's something like 40% pay over 30% of their income to their mortgage. So that's why a lot of people choose to rent out their small space or a small space on their property. I think we need to widen the eviction or the exemption criteria to any property that has under 3 dwelling units, and that would save ADUs, JDUs, lodgers, duplexes, triplexes, but it would also protect the multi-unit buildings. I think that the state of California was really wise when they created their legislation, and I don't understand why we couldn't have taken our time as a community to look at the more nuanced situations instead of being overly black and white.
And that's a minute. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Up next, we have Dave. Oops. Go ahead, Dave. You should be able to unmute now.
I thought we were talking now about buyouts.
We are on buyout agreement.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So I really feel like should be a decision that the property provider should be able to make, not something that they're extorted. I've heard of some horrific stories about people being extorted for certain amounts of money for someone to leave. In fact, I read on Nextdoor about some poor guy that they demanded $20,000 or they would stay for another year when he was just trying to sell his property, and they wanted it in cash. And so there are worse stories out there. And, I had my building for sale, and all of this stuff is ridiculous. No buyer will buy my building because of this. I can't sell it for even half of what it was worth. All these protections aren't necessary. I've already been at a huge disadvantage the whole time I've owned this building. I have felt like I'm the victim. I felt like I'm the one that's being controlled. I have no rights. I have to pay $700, $700 an hour for a lawyer. Everybody gets, all the tenants get free lawyers. And it's already very difficult for landlords to survive in Fairfax. It's already,
And
no
that's
matter how
time,
much you
Dave.
scrutinize. Yeah.
We're at a minute.
I
Thank
think
you
a
very
minute
much.
is not fair.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate your comment.
Coming up next, we have Brian and Sharon. And just a reminder to folks, when you give your comment, to announce whether you live in Fairfax or just own property, just so we kind of get a sense of the perspective. So Brian and Sharon up next, and go for it.
Brian and Sharon, again, we're still homeowners here in Fairfax. I think that there definitely needs to be some kind of cap on how much the buyout can be. Again, I think we don't understand what the issues were and how many people were having problems with these things that were written into the ordinance. So I'm not sure how in this process of what's happening today, we're going to get to resolutions and solutions, because if we were all there in a room talking together and we were in groups of people interested in these topics, we maybe could work through some alternative solutions. I don't see how that's happening today. And so it makes me feel like everyone's time today might be a really big waste of time. Plus, there are other people who are on this call who might have wanted to comment and say things, who don't feel comfortable doing that in this type of a situation. And so we're not hearing from many people who are participating in this meeting. I'm not sure what the reasons are, but we're not going to be able to get a really good sense of conversation.
That's a minute. Thank you.
Sharon.
Up next in the stack, we have Claire, who I'm not seeing here. Oh, wait, there you are, Claire. I'm going to unmute you, and then you have a minute. Let me know if you actually don't need that time. Okay, I see Claire, but she's not coming off of mute. So we'll go to the next person in the stack, who is Pamela.
Hello, everybody. I'll try and talk fast. I still live here since 1987. I was a single mom and I was living here and I needed extra money. So I rented out a room, and that became the nightmare of my life, with someone who destroyed my property, who drank alcohol, who threatened me. And every day after work, I would go home and lock myself, and I'm a nurse, and lock myself in my bedroom until I could figure out a way to get her out, which was money and paying her rent for the next place she moved. So these stories are true. I would never, ever rent a room now because of it. So the question is, do we really own our property anymore? Because our rights, if this stays on, but I don't think it will, because the people of Fairfax are smart, and we will have a vote and we will win. So thank you for pulling this together. We still need meetings. And I did ask the council to have an advisory committee for this group, and they absolutely ignored me. And this was before the vote. So thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
Next, we have Brenna Gubbins.
I'm a resident and a landlord, and I just wanted to speak to the buyout. Especially, I've had two different situations where I've had to move parents in over the last 2 years. I couldn't imagine having to, number one, financially take on that burden and then pay somebody to relocate. It's pretty absurd. And the amount that they're asking is just, I would have to take out a loan to move somebody out. And especially when you're dealing with emergency situations, there's no preparation. You don't get to prepare for it. It happens so quickly. Of course, definitely you would want to give the tenant as much notice as possible, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes emergency situations happen.
And
Thank
that's a
you.
minute. Thank you so much.
Next up in the stack, we have Susan. And just as a reminder for folks who maybe are coming in and out, we are still on buyout agreements. So Susan will be next in the stack.
Hi there. I'm a tenant here in Fairfax, and I think that there are ways to amend some things that are causing difficulty and confusion in our discussions. For example, many tenants understand a homeowner's situation where you don't want someone who's renting a room in your house you don't want to be held hostage to that. And I think that that can be left out of the ordinance and was supposed to be left out of the ordinance. But because of the fact that the town attorney did not leave it out, it's causing problems. So those things can happen. And also in general, we're talking about whose rights are here. And I would just want to mention that housing is not a commodity. It's a human right. And in that case, private property certainly has, an owner has a social function, which you must take into account.
That's a minute.
Sorry. All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we have about 5 more minutes left for this, or 4 more minutes left for this particular subject. And so the last 4 speakers will be PJ, Mark, Morgan, and Chris. And anyone else who ends up in the stack, we'll make sure you're first when we get to the next subject. So coming up, we have PJ.
Thank you. Specifically for buyouts, I'm not sure I understand the reason why someone would want to cap the buyout amount, because that's just sort of limiting the ability of a landlord or prospective buyer to get to a negotiated agreement. Nobody is forcing the property owner to enter into the buyout and give that certain amount. There's other ways to evict tenants still under the ordinance that don't require a buyout agreement. But on that ordinance, there was a provision that was taken out by the council in an earlier version of the ordinance that I think should be going back in. And that is the right to rescission on behalf of the tenant, so that they actually had the time to consult with an attorney. This is something like 10 days after a signed agreement, the tenant can withdraw their agreement to the buyout. Because without that, a landlord can say, this is the amount of money.
And that's time, PJ.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mark.
Yeah, as far as the buyouts go, most of the language from what I've heard from the various meetings is totally one-sided on the side of whoever is renting. And as far as having people move out, where you have a 2-month window for like a teacher or people in school, I'm sure that Marin Legal Aid can, or some of these other lawyers can come with enough motions or to postpone that. And so the next thing you know, the person who is the homeowner or unit owner now has these people for another 10 months before they get another opportunity. Now, I can understand if somebody is trying to put somebody out to get a new tenant, that there needs to be protections. We've seen that happen from time to time, but how many of these instances have gone on since the state regulations have come into effect? So I think really what we've been looking at is a situation, almost done, is a situation where these things are so far reaching and they have no real basis for what's going on at the moment.
Thank you, Mark. That's time. Thank you.
And up next, we have Morgan, and then Chris will be our last person to speak on this particular topic before we move on to the next one.
I'm a resident and duplex renter in Fairfax with my partner, Susanna. And I just wanted to sort of point out the fact that the woman who shared about her having someone living in her home who's a nurse and wasn't able to have that person leave, that I empathize with that situation for people that are willing to share a room in their house and share their bathroom and kitchen. And I think that in that situation, definitely people should have more of a say and control in what they do with their space.
Thank you for that comment, Morgan.
And then our last comment will come from Chris P.
Yeah, hey, I'm Chris. I'm a Fairfax resident. I think that buyouts are kind of important because if a tenant breaks a lease, they're expected to pay pretty much an exorbitant amount of money in order to fulfill the remaining money that they were supposed to pay because of that lease. So if a landlord is going to do that same thing, it doesn't make any sense as to why that would be capped. You know, you're forcing someone onto the streets. That is an emergency situation. We live in an extremely high cost county. The cost to recuperate in such a short amount of time would be exorbitant. So I see no reason to cap that.
Thank you, Chris. Judy, I will now give it back to you to move us into our next topic.
Okay, thank you so much, Britt. Thank you everyone for the comments thus far. We have put the digital comment card here. I'm seeing some responses come through. Thank you all for your patience as we try to get through these topics with many different opinions and life experiences. And next, we have right of return. And I'm going to read here a little bit that the ordinance says all tenants that are displaced based on sections 5.54.030 C5 or C6 or shall have the first right of refusal to return to the unit if it should ever be returned to the market by the landlord or successor landlord. The return tenancy shall include the same terms as the original tenancy, and the rent shall be rent lawfully paid by the tenant at the time the landlord gave notice of termination on a basis listed in sections 5.54 .030 C5 or C6 plus any lawful adjustment under section 5.55.080. All notices of termination of tenancy served under sections 5.54030 C5 or C6 shall state the lawful rent in effect at the time of termination of tenancy. If the tenant declines to reoccupy the rental unit after it is returned to the rental market, the lawful base rent for the new tenancy shall be the rent lawfully paid by the tenant at the time the landlord served the termination notice plus any lawful adjustment under this chapter or chapter 5.55. So that's actually from the ordinance here. I'm gonna just refresh this and show you those words on the screen here so that we make sure that we're all in alignment here on the right of return. And with that, I see we have several hands up. And again, we ask that we keep about a minute to, is this a good idea? Why or why not? What are some unintended consequences and what changes would you make?
So first in the stack, we have Georgia.
Hi, I'm a resident of Fairfax and I live in a home. In the past, I have rented rooms, so a room, not rooms plural, but am not currently doing that. I find the entire ordinance is a burden to the property owner, but this specifically it feels punitive that anyone should be able to have that hold on me over a 5-year period. I can't think of any other contract that I've entered into where somebody would be able to come back at me and have that kind of power over me after it had been ended. So I think it's punitive and it's overreaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia.
Up next, we have Brian and Sharon.
Yeah, we feel that the right of return is completely unreasonable in terms of, seriously, there's going to be a lot of landlords who are going to be thinking about probably selling their properties if these ordinances stay in place. And to think that if you put your home on the market, what buyer wants to buy a home that has this restriction on it? And who's going to be keeping track of where that tenant went in the meantime? But to have a 5-year right of return, if someone purchases the home and they think they're going to live in it, and then their circumstances change and they need to move, but they decide to keep it as a rental, they're forever tied into someone else's agreement. It's just unreasonable to think that this kind of a situation would be put in place, especially since some of those sales are going to be caused by this ordinance in the first place. And in terms of if there's some kind of something you need to improve your home and you have to move the tenant out and it takes you a long time and a lot of money to fix the place up so that they can move back in, to have that.
That's time. That's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Up next, we have Graham.
Thank you. The right of return is just, in my opinion, 20-year Fairfax resident property owner.
Yeah.
Right of return is another mechanism by which a tenant, be they there 12 and a half months or 20 years, is essentially put on the title of the property. And this section does not have a time limit on it. In fact, it reads ever. So that maybe this is just sloppy writing in the ordinance, but that section of the ordinance, if you interpret it literally, means this is forever. If a tenant is ever removed under these circumstances and the house is ever returned to the market, they have this right. So that definitely needs to be clarified, or perhaps that's the intention, I don't know, but that is extremely problematic. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Up next is Dave. You should be able to unmute now, Dave. There we go.
Great. So this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I mean, first of all, it's hard to even understand. I'm a college educated graduate and I cannot get my mind around all that, except that it's preposterous. It's unrealistic. It's crazy. Also, as far as, I heard people talking about, I've let many people out of their lease and I've never charged anybody. And it's a business. So why would anyone want to have someone leave? Why would anybody want to evict anybody unless they don't pay their rent or they're burning down the place or destroying your place? And then it's already so difficult the way it is now to have. My lawyer told me it would be 3 times expensive, 3 times as much hassle, and take 3 times as long to evict somebody now, provided you can evict them and they're not hiding in one of the loopholes of, all the different loopholes that there are for tenants here. They do end up owning our property. We're no longer
And
owners of our own property.
That's time, Dave. Thank you very much.
Up next, we have Sarah.
Hi, just a quick question before the minute starts. Do you want me to introduce where I am, and does that come out of my minute, or?
You can go ahead and introduce where you are and we'll take.
Okay, I was born and raised here. I live in Fairfax. I don't provide any housing. I've rented for a very, very, very long time. Currently own a small place. Okay. So this is one of the parts of the ordinance to me that's the most problematic, though the just cause ordinance in its entirety to me is like riddled with problems. I really agree with Georgia and Graham. Something that follows the title is really scary because often people need to rent out their spaces for unexpected reasons, such as taking care of a loved one in another part of the country who's sick and dying, or going to grad school, or there's a lot of different instances where you might actually have to move back in and you don't want a 5-year stain on your title following you around. Not all of us have owned property for 50 years and have a ton of equity to straddle some of these challenges like buyouts or like the cost of evicting people. And even if you do, I think it's unfair that 1.5 miles away, people don't have to deal with the same restrictions. So this needs to be a system level fix, like subsidizing housing, not a burden placed on individual homeowners to fill in the gap of a problematic system.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the background as well. You fit it in. Who's next, Britt?
I believe we have 5 more minutes on this subject, so we'll take 5 more speakers, which will be Morgan, Chris, Mark, Brenna, and Rick. And so those will be our last 5 speakers on this subject before we move on. So first up is Morgan.
I think I'm unmuted now. So again, I'm a resident and renter of Fairfax with my partner Susanna. And as an example, if the landlord decides to put in double pane windows or insulate the property and we have to move out during that process, I would like to have the opportunity to move back in. So that's one of the main kind of common sense situations where a tenant would want to move back in to the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then after Morgan is Chris. Chris, you should be able to unmute now. There we go.
Thank you. I accidentally muted myself again. Hey, Chris, Fairfax, resident. I would like to, let people know that this is here and it is kind of punitive because it is essential. There's a huge loophole that landlords have been known to take advantage of, and you can check eviction maps. Where basically they'll say like, hey, we need to, kick you out. We're going to close down the property. You've done nothing wrong at this point. They just need to use it for, let's say like owner move in or like a family member move in. However, that rental will go right back on the market and they will jack up the prices for the next tenant. So this is meant to prevent against that, and it is extremely important to keep in there.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Next, we have Mark.
I'm trying to unmute.
You're already unmuted.
Oh, okay. So yeah, what Chris is saying is right, but 5 years is totally absurd. 2 years at least is reasonable. In 5 years, an incredible amount of things can happen. Is the landlord supposed to hire a private detective to go and find the person who used to live there? There's what's the damages or treble damages against the landlord? I mean, it's kind of like, the whole thing with both of these ordinances is they're totally overboard. There's not a basis for 90+% of either of the ordinances. And this is really a prime example. Yeah, there needs to be protections, but not totally absurd protections. 5 years, the person could be in prison. The person could have just gotten out of Pelican Bay after being in solitary confinement, and you have to rent to them again? It's absurd. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mark. Next we have Brenna, right, Britt?
Yep, it will be Brenna, and then Rick will be our last speaker. Oh, sorry, let me just unmute Brenna. Brennan, there we go.
Hi. Okay, so I do agree with you, Morgan and Chris, for sure. Generally, it takes maybe a year or under to do renovations to a home and get it back on the market, which I do agree the tenant should be able to move back in. The homeowner obviously is taking on a huge cost with a renovation. So there needs to be a balance there. But when it comes to the situation of the homeowner selling their home and then the new homeowner who's purchasing, they're supposed to offer, if they choose to rent it, say something happens and their job moves across the country and they're going to rent out their home, renting to the previous tenants at the original price that they had, that's ridiculous, because you know that the new homeowners are taking on definitely more.
That's time, Brenna.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And then our last speaker on this particular subject will be Rick Hammer.
Thank you, Britt, and Judy. On this right of return, the clouding on the title is, that's just got to go. There are some cases short term, like Chris and Morgan had mentioned. That's a loophole. Loopholes are closed with finesse. They're not closed with being hostile in a legal sense. That I think that if someone is going to be returning, you certainly want them to be returning on good terms rather than being forced, or an owner being able to force to accept them. So this one really needs some work. It really needs some finesse, and it needs to be really split into different scenarios. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick.
I will pass it back to Judy to move us into our next topic.
All right, thank you so much, Britt, and appreciate everyone's patience as we move along here with the time that we have. Next is relocation payments. So in the ordinance, a landlord seeking to recover possession under sections 5.54.030C5 to 7 must make relocation payments to the tenant's household of the rental unit. The amount of the relocation benefit shall be equal to 2 months' rent at the rate of rent applicable at the time of the relocation. Relocation payments shall be paid at the time of the service of the notice of termination of tenancy. If the tenant fails to vacate the unit, the relocation payment must be returned to the landlord. Every year following the date of passage, the relocation payments specified in subsections 5.54.050A and B shall increase annually at the rate of increase in the rent of primary residence expenditure category of the Consumer Price Index for Marin County for the preceding calendar year, as that data is made available by the United States Department of Labor and published by the town. So on this as well, we're looking at whether this is a good idea, what are some of the unintended consequences, and what changes would you make? And I will also add some of that language to the slide here.
And then for stack on this, we will start with Dave.
Hi, so I'm not sure I completely understand the way this is supposed to work, but if it sounds like it's another way of having to do a buyout, if it's not clear as to how long, if a tenant is a long-term tenant of mine and for some reason I'm asking them to leave, I'm definitely going to, out of my own willingness. I mean, just because they're a good tenant, I'm going to give them money to move, relocation fees. But being told you have to, and being told that, I don't even know if they're there for a year. This isn't clear how this works. This is what my question is about it. I just don't understand it. It's not very clear. It's not laid out very well. There's no way what are they talking about? If the tenant's leaving on their own, or if we're asking them to leave, because we can't ask them to leave. There's no way to ask them to leave unless you want to buy them out.
Time, Dave. Thank you.
Up next, we have Luke.
Hi there, everybody. I just have a question, maybe for staff, if they could answer. Would these different clauses that are being discussed, right of return, buyout, relocation fees, would that all apply to a room that was being rented in a single family home? So if someone was renting a room in their home and somebody left, they would have the right of return to the home, even if the homeowner was no longer in a position where they needed to rent the room, where that was a good fit for their day-to-day life. Particularly if they needed a caregiver or someone else to occupy the room for medical needs.
Thanks, Luke. Do we have anyone who can answer that? I might ask some of our legal representatives or anyone from the town.
They might need to raise their hand in order to be unmuted, but yeah.
Go ahead, Lucy.
Hi, and so if I understand your question, is a room, a renter in a room exempt from getting relocation fees if they're evicted through no fault of their own?
I believe the question, Lucy, is if in the case of like a single, someone's renting a single home, do these ordinances actually protect for that particular situation, even if it's a case of needing that room for medical reasons, which might have been which it's like that. I believe that was the specific question from Luke.
As written, yes. So beginning of the presentation and on the town's information, or on the town's website that has the information, it shows all the units that these just cause protections apply to. So at this point, yes.
Thank you, Lucy. Luke, I'm going to unmute you just to make sure that did answer your question.
It did. Thank you. I think the right to return question for me is particularly pertinent in the case where an older adult might need a caregiver to move in. And I'm just wondering if there's any way to, at the very least, have language that would exempt an owner-occupied home if they have a medical need for somebody to be living in that room that would prevent a right to return.
And just so that folks know, I just put in the chat the link to the town's rent stabilization and just cause eviction FAQs. So just want to make sure you have that resource as well.
Thank you, Rachel.
Next up in the stack, we have Kay.
Okay, before you start your time, I just want to make sure, I want to ask, is this also including the temporary relocation fees?
So that is a separate topic. We do have that on the comment card. You're welcome to use the time, and we can extend a bit to get into temporary relocation as they're, I believe
Okay.
they're.
Okay, so I want to speak on the temporary relocation. I would like to see owner occupied exempt, because the temporary, as you all aware, oh wait, can I start over again?
Sure.
Thank you, sorry. So the temporary relocation is for if somebody has to move out and you need to fix up your apartment. I would like to see owner occupied exempt, because hence a fire, flood, tree fall down, that owner is also now homeless. And again, there are seniors and our poorest home providers, and they cannot do this. They cannot be able to take care of their own place and pay for someone else. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
And then next up in the stack, we have Morgan.
Thank you. Again, resident and renter in Fairfax with my partner, Susanna. I definitely feel that, you know, in situations where a tenant is living in a room in a house with a low income landlord, and, you know, there's a destruction of the property and they both have to move out. I think obviously in those situations where, you know, a landlord is put under a severe economic burden, I think, you know, anybody would feel reasonable that person should not be put out on the street so that a tenant can have a place to live. So I definitely empathize with that. But I think that the aspects where it's reasonable, it needs to stay in place for, you know, protecting tenants as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Up next, we have Graham. And give me 1 second just to unmute. There you go.
Thank you, Graham Irwin, 20-year Fairfax resident property owner. I'm trying not to laugh. I think it's gallows humor in my case to imagine a house where someone's rented a room and now in the title, when that house is sold, that room in that house is set aside for whoever that is to come back. The other thing I want to point out that's ridiculous in this, the rent control caps the annual increase of rent to something like 60% of CPI or 5%, whichever is greater. But these benefits that are being extended are at CPI. It seems another example of a very prejudicial and uneven law that's just people running amok, giving benefits to one side of this. And they are all at expense of somebody else. That's the thing. All of this without more housing is a zero-sum game. It's taking from someone and giving to somebody else. And this is not a level playing field. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Up next, we have Wynn Richards in the queue. I'll go ahead and ask you. There you go.
Hi, Fairfax renter. I mentioned before that I was asked to leave my duplex after being an absolutely perfect paying tenant for 15 years with my small family. And when I was asked to leave so that the owner could make repairs and make the apartment more expensive, the duplex more expensive, I wasn't giving anything, nothing at all. So to the landlord who said they were so good of heart and always give their tenants some extra money when they leave, boy, I wish I was their tenant because I was given nothing. And I think most landlords don't give their tenants anything when they tell them to leave. It was a no fault eviction at all. So I don't know, anything would have helped, anything. So I know it hurts landlords to help their tenants if they're evicted, but it sure is hard on tenants as well to have nothing when they're just told to leave. That's all.
Thank you, Sarah. Or was that Sarah? That was Wynn. Thank you, Wynn. I had in my queue Suzanne Stringari. I might be saying that incorrectly, and apologies if I am, but I don't currently see that individual in here. We'll give a little bit of time just in case they pop back up. Just re-raise your hand and I'll unmute you. I'll give a little bit of time. Okay. Well, if Suzanne is not currently here, then we'll go next to Sarah Gold, who I did just see, but I don't think I see them anymore. Nope, no Sarah. Okay. Then who I definitely see is Niccolo. Niccolo, you're next. Go for it.
Yeah, I think that there's a bit of a
disconnect between what the law is saying and what people are imagining the law will have consequences. You can go to the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency and look at 60 years of eviction and relocation, where the agency has evicted actually thousands of people, and what their relocation costs have been. And when people actually do apply for relocation and get it, the numbers are between 10 and 20% over, but the average about 16%. So, but most landlords, and there's data on this Public Policy Institute and other, like I put up on the chat, Princeton, most landlords are able to avoid any relocation benefits or any payment to have a tenant leave. Most tenants leave when they're asked to, even in no fault situations. And as I said before, if the individual landlord who's running a business does their due diligence in checking out the tenant and has a good lease, then they're likely not to have to incur any costs.
Thank you. That's time.
And Rachel, how much longer on this topic?
Well, I would say 2 more minutes, and then maybe we can talk about what's coming next.
That's great.
Thank you. We'll go through the people who are currently in my queue since it's only 3 more. It'll be Liz, PJ, and Georgia will be the last speaker, and then we can talk through next steps. So Liz will be first. You go ahead and go for it.
There we go. Hi. So I'm a homeowner in Fairfax. I would have liked to have rented out the ADU that I built, but I'm not going to under these circumstances. But I just have a question. I put it 4 times in the chat and no one has answered it, but I would like to hear from the town or from the facilitators if you know the following information. Data regarding the number of or the percentage of cost-burdened housing providers. I would like to know what percentage of them are elderly or over 62 themselves. I would like to know what housing providers are students and school staff members. I would like to know a little bit more about the housing providers. I mean, not only did we get excluded from all these initial conversations, but it looks like we've been excluded from any of the data gathering too. Can anyone help me with this? That's it.
Thank you, Liz. Anyone here who either compiled data or has data to share for Liz? And we'll give you a moment to raise your hands. Liz, we did see that request. That is not data that we have on hand as the facilitators of this workshop. And we have recorded your comments. So hoping we can get your questions answered. Anyone in the chat? Okay, thank you, Heather. Heather does not have that information from the town of Fairfax, but thank you for asking, Liz. And that's something that we will try to follow up on in our report. Britt?
Up next, we have PJ.
Thanks, PJ Pfeffer, Fairfax homeowner and resident. Sticking specifically to relocation payments, this is, there's a risk obviously to both the landlord and the tenant, and it's really a matter of risk allocation here, who is better able to prepare for it. And in this situation, even a owner occupant landlord is using their home as a business. They're getting the benefit of the profit of operating this business when there isn't an emergency. It seems natural in most other contexts that we expect the business owner and operator to, hedge or provide for risks like these by buying insurance or setting aside money. The landlord presumably has homeowners insurance. There's also tenant insurance. You can require tenants to have rental insurance. There's a lot of ways to hedge and anticipate the risk, but since the landlord is the one operating the business and getting the profit of it,
And
it seems
that's
like
fine.
better to anticipate the burden.
Thank you, PJ.
Up next, we have Georgia Gibbs.
Okay. I just want to, again, I think this is punitive and the entire ordinance should be dismissed. And we can have a dialogue at that point about what problems really need to be addressed. I do think that this ordinance feels like it's geared more towards corporate ownership of rentals, which I don't think is the case in this community. And so it's very off the mark. But I also feel in our community, since I moved here in 2003, we've had multiple elections where we had to vote to save Fairfax. And that meant we weren't voting for property tax bonds to cover new sidewalks or additions to the park or things like that, but actual town functioning. We were voting to keep police. We were voting to keep fire. We were voting to keep emergency services. And I kind of think that they look at property owners of any ilk as their cash cow and don't do their job in managing the city in a way that's effective and meaningful and healthy for its entire community. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you, Georgia. Georgia was going to be our last comment, but I see that David Frasheen has his hand raised, and I don't think we've been able to hear from him this whole entire time. So let's close out with David, and then I'll kick it back to Judy to take us to the next steps.
Thanks, Brett. Go ahead, David.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just logged in not too long ago. I wanted to be here sooner. Thank you for doing this. I'm glad everybody's actually meeting to even talk about it. I'm a landlord. I have one duplex, and I've slaved away to make it into a good place for tenants. The thing I just don't understand, is how is it if we negotiate fairly, a tenant and I negotiate fairly, and they rent my place for a year or two, and after that period of time is over, if I need to do something different with the property, why do I have to pay anything to help the tenant go somewhere else? I understand that the cost of living is expensive for everyone. It's ridiculously expensive for me as a landlord to maintain the place. I just got done repairing the last 18 months of atmospheric river damage to my hillside. Nobody's giving me a dime to help me do that. I've gone out of my way to protect my tenants. And
that's kind, David.
I just don't understand why I have to pay for someone to leave after a certain period of time. I just don't get it. I don't understand how that makes any sense. So that's what I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
And so that would be our last comment. I will kick it back to Judy to take us through next steps.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share with you all. I've seen a lot of questions about how the topics came up. So these are all of the components of the ordinance listed in order. At the beginning of our session, we asked that you prioritize 5 out of the 9 here so that we can use the time in a productive manner. So we've covered types of units covered, owner move-in, buyout agreements, right of return, and relocation payments. Seeing as there are still some hands raised and that we've had some questions here, we do want to open up for if there's an additional topic that we want to discuss in the next 30 minutes or so, and then we are going to have to close up. Rachel, thank you so much for your help in timekeeping. And from here, we're going to ask that folks try to keep your comments to at least one of these topics here. We do know that subleasing came up as a question as well. So we will spend the next 30 minutes going through some of what wasn't already shared. We also have the digital comment card with all of these topics. So I'm going to stop.
Just a clarifying question for you, Jude. We're still keeping the comments to 1 minute, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And I'm still taking stack. And so I still have folks who are in the stack in there. And just a reminder, so we're opening it up to whatever topics that you may want to discuss that are within those ordinance or any general comments. I have first on here Morgan, but I think Morgan might have dropped off. And if so, then the next person I have on here is Luke.
Hey, everybody. So just hearing some of these comments about landlords as business owners, share a little bit of the data that we have from the home match program about the older adults that are renting rooms in their home in Marin County. Our all-time, which is, roughly 130 matches over the past 10 years. The average income of our home providers is $50,000 a year. Over the last year, we had 21 matches. The average income of our home providers was $35,000 a year. And so who we're talking about from the perspective that I'm trying to share is very low income older adults that are living at home alone on a low fixed income. They've often taken a lot of the equity out of their home already. They're not in a position to sell their home and then move into a retirement community. Those who aren't very, very low income are right at that bubble where they wouldn't be able to afford moving into a retirement community. And so for this demographic of folks renting a room in their home or apartment, we're talking about really their last lifeline to remaining stably housed for very, very low income seniors that are at a high risk of many improprieties in a relationship. Our program is here to mitigate those risks. But I just want to make it clear that we're not talking about folks that can plan ahead financially and have lots of money saved up to be able to pay these fees that we're talking about because they're already so low.
It's a minute.
Sorry about going.
No worries. We're just doing our best to hear as many voices as possible within the time we have. Go ahead, Britt.
Up next is Forrest and Saskia. I hope I'm saying that right. Feel free to correct me if I'm not.
Hey, yeah, no, that was pretty good. It's Forrest here and my partner Saskia. She's actually a data analyst for a investment bank that does some financing for affordable housing in the city. We are both renters and residents in Fairfax, but someone really quick was asking about data earlier, so she pulled that up, and this is from the 2017 to 2021 American Community Survey. So if you were looking at cost burden, which is folks spending 30% or more of their income on their housing costs, whether that's a mortgage or rent or whatever. So for renters in Fairfax, 47.5% of them are considered cost burdened, and about a third are considered severely cost burdened. Homeowners overall, it's 30%. And interestingly, because there was some talk about seniors, for homeowners who are 65 and older, it's 27%, so actually a little bit lower. Just wanted to put that data out there. Obviously, there's a lot more to this because if you're paying a mortgage or you're paying rent can be different, and property tax and all the other stuff that goes into it. But just wanted to put that data out there. That's all.
Thank you, Forrest. Up next, we have Graham Irwin.
Hello. Oh, I'm unmuted. Thank you. Graham Irwin, 20-year resident property owner. I have a scenario I envision. I'm not a lawyer, so maybe someone could correct this, but it seems to me, no matter who you rent to, there's no control over what members of their family they could move in. So you could have someone over 62 and someone under 18 move in on that lease, at which point, if you ever needed to sell your house, you would have to give the 62-year-old or older a year's notice, and the 18 or the under 18 would mean you could only sell it during the summer, if I'm correct. That seems like a disaster, and it's not a disaster you can prevent even if you try to discriminate by age, because a tenant can bring their whole family in. Whole thing is really problematic. I don't know what to tell you. I thank you for your time. I've got to get back to manually repairing my house right now, AKA exploiting the working class. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
And up next after Graham, we have Rick. Rick Hammer.
Thanks again, Britt and Judy. I am a renter and have been in Fairfax entirely. My ownership is not in Fairfax. I have also been a victim of just cause, or I should say not just cause. And I really think that these relationships are not always natural and friendly. And I think that with all of these, mediation should be able to be initiated by either party so that it can be made so that the two parties will talk to each other about the situation rather than just taking a 60-day notice and dealing with an attorney. I think that all we really wanted at our last opportunity was to make offers to our property owner, which would have been great. Thank you.
That was exactly a minute, Rick.
Okay. Now I have to find the button.
There you go, Drew. Mute, and then up next we have Dave Barranco. It looks like he's in motion. There we go. There you go, Dave.
All right. Well, some things were mentioned about screening process, and the last person that spoke about you have no control over who moves into your space and what can happen as far as all that goes. And it's scary because you can screen and screen and screen, which I do, and you still end up with someone that does horrible things to your space and then won't pay rent, and then you have to go to an attorney, and it's very expensive already. There's a lot of expenses involved in just keeping the places up, and the landlords are burdened with all of that. And now they're required to pay out. My biggest fear is that when there's a lot of work to be done, you not only have to pay for all this work that has to be done, but then you have to pay if the tenant is inconvenienced in some way for their residency somewhere else. And it's like, well, will the work actually get done? I mean, can the landlord afford to do it? What'll happen to all these buildings that might need work, but the landlords can't do it because they can't afford everything that's being thrown on top of it.
Right.
And I have a lot of other concerns. This whole thing is a mess.
Thank you for sharing.
Up next we have Raniero. I hope I'm saying that right. You should be able to unmute now. There we go. Oh, Raniero, we can't, even though you're unmuted, I can't hear you. I'm wondering if I'm the only person who's having that issue. Go ahead and unmute again. No, I'm still not able to hear you. You might need to go down to the sound setting on your Zoom. On the Zoom toolbar, you should see the microphone that's off to the far bottom left, and you should be able to press on the arrow that's up. You're going to want to make sure your sound is being your microphone and your speaker are both being funneled through your computer. Okay, I'll unmute you again. Let's see if it works now. Go ahead and talk. I'm still not able to hear you, unfortunately. I'm sorry. If you want, you can type something into the chat, and if there's a question, I'll make sure to go back and answer that. And I would definitely continue to work on your sound. I'm sorry about that.
Go back now.
Oh, there we go. All right, you go ahead.
Thank you so much. I haven't spoken because I wanted to hear the whole thing, and I am actually very pleased about the process. It's not perfect, it's messy, but I'm especially glad to hear the landlords and their point of view. I understand. I hope we can work it out, and I have faith that we will work things out and make it fair for everybody. We definitely don't want to go back. We don't want to start from scratch and get everything out. We need to move forward and make it better, make the system better. And I think what's going to happen in the future, what I see happening is that people that do not want to lose control over the property would not get into this business, and people who want to will go by the laws and make it available for everybody. We're not going to lose housing out of this. We're just going to make it fair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that comment. I'm glad we were able to hear your voice, Renero.
Thank you.
And up next, we have John Pope.
Hello, everyone. I'm a 40-year resident here in Fairfax, along with my family. And I'm really grateful we're in a country where we can have these kinds of important discussions and work things out. My point would be on all the ordinances, I think they're overreaching. I have problems with them. But my real concern is that the ordinances feel to me like they were presented searching for a home from another area. They found a home here in Fairfax. And when I look at the whereas and wherefores, the reasoning for them, and then look at the one paragraph that is the purpose and goal of these ordinances, I see a real disconnect. So what I would like to propose is some real community workshops where we roll up our sleeves, work with each other, community people solving community problems, and not trying to solve social ills across the nation. That would be my point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. That was also exactly a minute.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Britt.
Up next, we have Susan. Just give me 1 second to unmute. There you go, Susan. You should be able to unmute now.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm a tenant here in Fairfax. I just want to throw out a little ethical and theological language because that's part of my background. When we see, all the encampment in Nevada or Oakland or whatever, and even people who in San Rafael, we should be really ashamed of ourselves. Homelessness is a human rights violation. And people who are owners, they talk about their rights, but they also have responsibilities. And on a theological viewpoint, you could say private property is under a social mortgage. It has a fundamentally social function, and owners must take into account not only their own welfare, but that of others as well. So that is one of the underlying themes that we talk about when we talk about justice. We're not just talking about owners' concerns. So anyway, that's what all I want to mention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Up next is Sarah Gold. And give me 1 second, just going on that. And there we go. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi again. I just want to say you're doing such a great job of muting, unmuting, and announcing people. That is hard. Susan, to what you just said, I agree with some of what you said, but I also think that we have to hold a couple things as true. Housing is a human right and property rights are foundational freedoms. And we have to hold both of those and work in the overlap with nuance, because you can't tip the scales so far to one side that no one can rent out their property anymore, except for big corporate providers who have legal on staff. I mean, that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the community, and it's not good for tenants. And Luke, the one that helps seniors rent a room in his house, I would say that he is speaking to a demographic of property owners that exist in more than just the senior category. There are people who are house cost burdened, who are younger, who have families, who are single parents like myself. And while I'm not a provider right now, I really live in that margin. And these people also need to be held in the process. And I'd just like to know, my last question for the facilitators is, how is this workshop going to impact the ordinances? Like, where are we going with this information now? Because it just seems like a lot of public comment, and I'd really like to understand how this is going to meaningfully be collaboration and change. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sarah. The intention was, again, as I put in the chat, we were asked to scope a workshop where we could prioritize some components of the ordinance and get some input on how that what sort of changes might be made. And after this, there will be a summary of this that will go to council on June 7th. We will, as much as possible, highlight those constructive comments about changes. But council will see everything that was reported back today. We're using this time to allow folks to share anything that wasn't covered already in the way that we designed the workshop prior. Hope that answers your question. Go ahead, Britt.
I will. It's now Milan Mushet, I believe. Let me just go ahead and lower that hand and then go for it. And please let me know if I said your name incorrectly.
You did. It's Milan Machette.
Apologies for that.
No problem. Everyone else does too. I am in favor of repealing both ordinances and giving the voters the right to talk. I don't think that people should be allowed to sublease property without the owner's permission, because they could be subleasing it to unqualified parties. I feel there's a lot of data that has not been looked at with the council. For example, the number of single family homes that are having ADUs and junior ADUs. I think that private property rights apply to all homeowners and property owners, including apartment buildings. I would be interested to know how many tenants, I put this in the chat, have had their rent raised, what percent annually in the last 3 years, how many have been told to leave so relatives could move in, or because of work, and then determined that the property was re-rented right away. I don't think we have this information. I think it's very important to make a decision that is fair to all parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Britt, you're on mute.
Thank you. Up next will be Kay.
I was unmuted. So, okay, this is Kay. So I would like to, we didn't cover the subletting clause, and there's a lot of confusion in the chat and with the FAQs that LAM released. I would like to know, I'd like to let everyone know that for the subletting, for you to put it in the lease, to be, to limit the number of subletters, that has to be at the beginning of tenancy. So everybody that is in a rental already cannot add that to their lease. So that is, like, to me, very shady that they don't include it. And everyone says, like, you can put this and a lease and it'll be a breach of lease. I would also like to know that for it to be a breach of lease for eviction, it has to be a material breach of lease, which is actually, I believe, and I'm a nurse, not a lawyer, but I believe that has to actually be monetary damages. I would like Lucy, if she could, to concur, to say if anything I said was untrue. Thank you.
And I do see that Lucy is still here. Lucy, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Thank you. So breach of lease, that's covered in state law. And it is, one example state law gives is a subtenancy that is against the lease. Also, non-payment is considered breach of lease. So it is, and the law is clear that it has to be a material breach. So some things could be a question for a judge. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Lucy. Kay, let us know in the chat if there's any follow-up there. In the meantime, up next would be Sierra Tuna Fish.
Howdy, I'm a Marin native, not that it really matters. And for the record, I think humans are the most invasive species there is planetarily. If I rent to someone, I have an agreement and a contract with them. and they're responsible for paying the rent and, communicating with me, for example, and my wife. If they choose to take in a roommate, that should be between them without really involving me, unless we're going to rewrite the whole rental agreement somehow. We choose who we rent to, and we have an agreement with them, and we have some kind of rapport, and we screen people. So, point being, if somebody takes in a roommate, I don't think they should have all kinds of rights against our contract with our tenant, because it's not a contract with them. Or are you saying that we have to rewrite a contract if they take in a roommate? Because I'm not granting the same rights to a roommate as I am to the tenant that we have an agreement with. And it scares the heck out of me that perhaps somebody can take in a roommate or a sub-renter, and all of a sudden they have entitlements and rights that I never agreed to. I didn't screen them, I didn't choose them, we didn't pick them, for example.
1 minute, Sierra. Thank you.
We have about 5 more minutes at this time. And so there will be 5 more speakers. I'm going to prioritize those folks I feel like we haven't heard from yet. So right now I would like to ask Mo McManus to speak. I believe we haven't heard your voice yet.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, hi neighbors and friends. I just wanted to say I'm a longtime renter here in Fairfax, about approximately 35 years. I'm also a senior. First off, I'd like to say thank you very much to the facilitators for doing this. I know that this was is quite a job. I just want to say I am in support of the ordinances, but I'd also like to say that I'm in support for working together to make possible amendments. And I think we're off to a good start. And I'm hoping that we can continue to work on this. And that's really all I want to say. I think we're a great community. I personally love living in Fairfax and want to continue. I admit I have a great landlord, and that makes my life much easier, but that could change at any minute. I just hope we can work this out as a community. And again, thank you very much for facilitating this.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Go ahead, Britt.
After that, I would like to go to Joe McGarry. I also feel like we haven't heard your voice yet either. Let me just see to unmute. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the facilitators for all you've done today. My name is Joe McGarry, and I'm a long-term renter here in Fairfax. And I'm fully in support of the Just Cause ordinance. And but I would like to say that, through the process today and in the last few months, since the ordinance was passed, I've come around to see that maybe the lodger, there should be a lodger exemption to the Just Cause. I really, really hear the individual scenarios for that. So I appreciate all the dialogue around that. But as for the rest of the pieces of the Just Cause, I'm fully in support of them. I work at Good Earth Natural Foods, and I'm a rarity here. Someone who rents in this town is able to work in this town. And I've seen that scenario, that number drop of that combination at my workplace from 30% when I was hired 10 years ago to it's about 15% now. And we live in multi-unit apartment complexes. We live in duplexes. We live in single family homes, and we live in ADUs. I've surveyed those folks at work, and so we need protections in all of those. And so thank you very much. And I also maybe some clarification moving forward, maybe another workshop on the subleasing piece. There seems to be a lot of questions there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe.
Up next, let's go with Ashley. I believe, Ashley, we haven't heard your voice either.
Thanks. I just wanted to sort of echo and amplify what Sierra Tunafish said around subletting. The idea that I enter into a contract with, let's say, 2 to 3 tenants, and then 6 months down the line, all of a sudden that becomes 5 tenants, and I don't have the ability to vet them with their ability to repay, or their criminal history with me being an owner occupied housing provider is terrifying. And then as this is a single family home and utilities are included in rent, now I have a much higher utility burden. Am I supposed to now go all the way over to Berkeley to petition to slightly increase rent beyond what's currently limited? It just all seems ridiculously burdensome, which was basically my comment at the beginning of this workshop. But I will thank you guys for facilitating this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. So we have time for 2 more speakers. We'll go with, let me see who's next in my stack. Nicolo.
Yeah, I think that it's good focus on the sublet. I know from experience that if you have a good lease or rental agreement that you can control and keep people from subletting. Also, that the law allows you to, if your renter sublets at a higher rate, you can get the payment back from them, have any amounts that they have collected above that. But really, we should also keep in mind with the landlords that we live in a capitalist country and no one is guaranteed a profit or an income. And that basically, if you are renting, you're engaged in a business and you're taking the risk just like any investor or any business person in making any return on your investment. So really, it's not, we're not talking about puppies here. We're talking about business and making money, and essentially society does not guarantee you a return.
Okay, thank you so much.
And then our last speaker before we close it out will be Michael Sexton.
Great, I appreciate this. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to respond to all those comments. First one about business risk. Yeah, I think homeowners, mom and pop landlords take on the risk, knowing the risk every single day. What we don't want is the extra risk brought about by these extra rent control ordinances. California already has AB 1482, which is the way that interacts, the way that tenants and landlords interact. Business risk is covered in there. What we don't want is this extra risk. There's some talk about relocation expenses. The DSA estimated that for like a 2-bedroom, the relocation expense for the what the housing provider would pay is about $10,000. What we really need in all this is not a tweak of these onerous rent control ordinances, but really a fresh start. We need to be able to bring anything to a vote of the people. That's the only way that the results of this workshop and that rent control can be legitimate. If it's not brought to the vote of the people, it's really illegitimate. And that's how I feel about these ordinances. And you can hear from a lot of people, a lot of housing providers, long-term residents and homeowners in Fairfax, their frustration that they weren't allowed to vote on these. The petition, the Keep Fairfax Fair Act, which I urge everybody to sign, is the only way that we're going to be able to bring this to a vote of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. It was exactly 1 minute.
Thank you, Michael. And with that, I will turn it back to Judy to close this out.
Yep, so I'm seeing a lot of comments here about the timing. There was language in some communications that went out that we would go approximately until 3 p.m. We have finished our portion here of the workshop that we scoped according to the topics that were prioritized. We've collected a lot of input from you all. We really appreciate you spending so much of your time. We also have the digital comment card, and we've heard a lot of recommendations for how to improve and recommendations for what to bring to council. We really do want to apologize for some of the glitches that happened in the beginning. Certainly, I've never been Zoom bombed before. That was a new experience, and it was unfortunate, but thank you all for sticking around. Also, the initial limitations on participation, really appreciate that folks came back and that we had some good conversation here, that we have some meaningful input to put forward, lots of different ideas shared. And again, really appreciate your time in allowing us to hold this space with you.
And just to clarify, one of the questions are asking if we get paid till 3. We get paid by deliverables, so it's not an hourly rate. We get paid to scope this and to facilitate it. So it's not that we're cutting out early and we're still going to get paid till 3. The deliverable is facilitating this. The invite did say that we probably would not need to use that time all the time until 3. So that's just kind of the language that maybe some folks miss. But we did, like Jude says, we covered our topics, and there is the digital comment card, and really, really want to appreciate all of you showing up on a Saturday to take this time to give all of this input and remaining very respectful to each other's opinions. And there was a lot of great dialogue in the chat.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Britt.
Facilitators rental status, we are not located in Fairfax. We are located in San Francisco. Both Jude and myself rent in San Francisco. And with that, everyone, have a good day.
Digital comment card, and we will go ahead and make sure that we email that out to everyone who registered, and we will have that posted for you all. Thank you. Thank you all so much.